morning, good afternoon, or good night for people who are connected here in this for this conference there. So I will share my screen in order to, I will introduce first the constellation in general, what it is and what are the main principles of the constellation. And then Jean-Louis will follow in discussing more about the approach and the methodology itself. And hopefully opening for some questions there. So let me share my screen first. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, maybe you can make it full screen, your image.
Yes.
Your slide also.
It's a bit slow, sorry for that.
Okay. That's
okay,
it, perfect.
So, okay, so I like to just to introduce the constellation first of all. And first I will start by explaining a little bit the purpose of the name. The name of the constellation, in fact, is spring from the following image, that communities that mobilize their own strengths to carry a local response are like stars in the sky. And as they connect with each other to learn and share, they create an assembly of stars, which is a constellation. That's why we have called our organization the constellation itself. So what is this, in fact, the constellation? And if we can move to the next slide. Okay. Here what? So in fact, the constellation itself is an organization which supports a network of people or groups and communities, and that share the same vision of the path to community development. We are geared by our common inspiration that the capacity of communities to envision, assess, and take action using their own strengths. And that is what we call the local response itself. So the constellation dreams of a world where communities take action based on their strengths to realize their dream. They inspire others by when they connect to learn and share, and for mutual support. So it's we in fact help communities and groups and individuals to develop, to discover first of all, and to develop their resilience capacity to a given challenge. It could be health, it could be other challenge as well, and it could be in most of the cases we were there, or we were interacting with community around health challenges in general. This is just a picture of the constellation as it is. It represents also our governance system, where we try to include in our governance people from the field and from the communities themselves. It is important for us to have the voice of community members in our system in order to get a direct feedback of and knowledge, if I can, of the community action and how the communities are taking care of themselves. So the main principle of the Soul Cell CP methodology, this is the methodology that we use when we interact with communities in general. So we stimulate and support the self-reflection of within communities and groups through facilitated interaction. So, and we don't want to control or impose solutions to communities, but we rather reveal the strengths and the opportunity within communities and groups, believing that learning from outsider and our self-learning is an important aspect of our methodology. As you can see, and everyone, we consider that everyone has something to learn and something to share. And the learning aspect in our methodology is a very important one. When people connect, they share their best practice, lessons, and questions, and they create energy and motivation to move toward more actions and common action itself. So another common principle is that we consider that the community change, but we don't change community, meaning that if there is not ownership of the actions of the communities for a given challenge, then we cannot modify, or the community cannot change themselves and cannot move towards more resilience finally. And our attitude and our way of working is based on the fact that we move from the attitude of expert and to facilitators. And being a facilitator is really believing that the people's strengths to respond to any kind of challenge. And our purpose is therefore to reveal the strengths of the people in the communities, and considering that together we have solution, and together include the facilitator himself or herself acting with the community there. And also another way of stimulating and sustaining the response from the communities is to connect them with other groups and communities. Through this connection, we constantly learn, and the community learns how to move forward, and they share also their best practice itself. As operational principle in the constellation, in our organization, we open frank, positive, and comprehensive dialogue within groups and communities. It's not external, but it is internal dialogue that where we provoke and we stimulate self-reflection itself. And one of the aspects, and Jean-Louis will emphasize on that, is on the active listening that we practice, and the facilitators that we are training are practicing with the communities. We also use a simple set of tools that can be managed and used by community members in an easy way. This is important also to remember, because we are not developing very sophisticated tools, so that everybody, every community members can therefore use those tools for developing and working with his or her communities. The collaboration involvement of all local actors, especially for information and technical inputs. And when we address, that means that when we address communities, we are considering and we are trying to involve all segments of the community, being official or non-official there. We encourage sustainable change that is tailored to the need of the group community members. And this is why we emphasize the fact that the changes and the solution are given or developed by the community members themselves. And as far as they move and they practice, or they put this change or this action in, they implement these actions, they can learn slowly, learn by experience and learn by themselves using some of the tools that we propose. We stimulate self-confidence and confidence in others' abilities. One aspect of the approach and the methodology is really to re-emphasize or redevelop or stimulate the self-esteem of people in the community so that they can take the lead and in the response they are developing there. And we encourage the emergence of innovative and creative ideas through this internal dialogue there. So I will give the floor to Jean-Louis now, who is going to speak about the methodology and the approach itself. Jean-Louis, if you want. Jean-Louis, do you hear me? But we don't hear you.
Jean-Louis, can you unmute yourself? Thank you. Jean-Louis, we still cannot hear you. Can you unmute yourself, please? That's it.
Here I am, unmuted.
Can you start from where?
All of you.
Thank you.
My point starts from a very simple statement. Salt, our DNA, enables the transition. When we reflect on terrorism, climate change, COVID, we realize that the mechanical view we are used to is not sufficient to address fully the issue at hand. Why would that be? Well, simply because we, human beings, are not mechanical systems. We are living systems. And so, as we practice salt, which is our DNA, we have realizing more and more that this way of thinking and way of working, which I'll expand on in a minute, helps us make that transition. Luc, can you go to the next one, please? So, salt enables the journey from a complicated, hierarchical, inert world to the complex world of the living. Please, the next one. So what are characteristics of living systems? Well, for so far I understand, this is still something to explore in my view. Living systems are open to energy. They are made of multiple changing connections. A critical element is that there is continuous two-way communication between the elements of the system, and that the flow of energy going through those connections enables self-organization. Now, what is salt? How is it possible that it would enable that transition? Well, as Luc said, our initial starting point is that we are interacting with others, communities in the large sense. We are there to appreciate strengths. So it really starts with a change in mindset. A decision we take, it is a conscious individual and collective decision to see strengths in people and in situations where before we would focus on problems. And what we have observed over now the 20 years of practicing thought, it becomes a way of life. It sticks to us to a point that seeing the world as a bunch of complicated problems is something that doesn't satisfy us. We want to go beyond the problems towards the solutions using our own energy. Next one, please. So living systems and COVID. How would a living system response look like to COVID? Well, first, policy would be based on trust, not on fear. People would be motivated. People, every one of us, would be motivated, and that would be recognized, that people are motivated to protect the vulnerable while staying connected with those vulnerable. Young and old people would have a say in the design of the response. They would seek objective information about the risks and prevention methods, information that is not tainted by conflict of interest or mistrust. They would communicate among themselves in various groups, neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, first-line healthcare, and between those groups. They would share their experience with others so that gradually, from group to group, from community to community, they would build their resilience as society as a whole. Now, I choose to pick one element of SALT, which is daring to listen. Listening makes us vulnerable. When we listen deeply, we are making ourselves vulnerable to the experience of other people. Leaving aside analysis and judgment to fully immerse ourselves in the relationship that is being built while we are listening. Then we can sense how we open ourselves to a field that reaches beyond us. And then energies, amazing amounts of energies are available to dream and act. I just end with one invitation to circlo.be as an example. One experience among the so many we have in Constellation, and that is circlo.be. I invite you to that site. This is a set of podcasts where I told my dream to young people, to Nora and 11 other young people, both Flemish and Walloons, and we practiced together deep listening. From that, they were invited to continue their conversation with people they trust in their environment, a grandmother, a mother, a friend. And the podcast is a series then of their travel, their understanding, their expression also of all what they are going through when they are isolated, glued to a screen for 2 years instead of building the relationships they need as they grow. Voilà, this is what my little contribution